What if the scariest thing about the dark wasn't what lived in it, but what wore a human face inside it? The men and women who pin on a badge every morning don't just deal with crime. They deal with things they can never unsee. Things that follow them home. Things that crawl into the back of their minds and stay there long after the shift ends and the cruiser is parked. These are not rumors. These are not urban legends. These are the testimonies of former American law enforcement officers, people who swore an oath to protect the public and in doing so stepped through doors that most of us will never have to open. 4 stories. 4 former officers. 4 nights they will never forget, no matter how hard they try. Stay with us. Because by story number 2, you're going to want to sleep with every light in your house burning. The house on Millbrook Drive. Told by a retired officer, 32-year veteran of the Dallas Police Department. I gave 32 years of my life to the Dallas Police Department. I started when I was 22 years old, fresh out of the academy, full of fire and ambition. I retired at 54, quieter than I'd ever been, with shadows under my eyes that no amount of sleep could fix. In 3 decades, I saw things that would rearrange the furniture of a normal person's mind permanently. Car wrecks that looked like abstract art. Overdoses in elementary school parking lots. Things I won't put words to even now. But there is one night, one specific night that I will carry to my grave. It was a Tuesday, or maybe a Wednesday. The details blur at the edges now, but the important parts are razor sharp. My partner at the time was a guy named Ray Callahan, 12-year veteran built like a defensive lineman, scared of almost nothing. Almost. We caught a domestic disturbance call around 11:40 p.m., dispatched from a neighbor complaint on Millbrook Drive, a residential street on the southwest side of Dallas that had been declining for years. Calls like that were standard issue on a weeknight. Someone's husband throwing dishes. Someone's wife screaming loud enough to rattle the window frames. You go in, you separate them, you write the report, and you move on with your night. We didn't even bother to take our coffees out of the cup holders. The address was a 2-story house set back from the road. The front yard was dead, not just unmowed, but dead, like something had poisoned the soil. The porch light was off. What I noticed first, as we rolled up slow with our headlights cutting across the front of the place, was that the front door was standing wide open. Not cracked, not slightly ajar, wide open, like whoever was inside either left in a hurry or never planned to come back. Ray and I exchanged a look. Standard protocol. We called it in, gave our position, announced our presence at the scene. I stepped out of the cruiser first and immediately caught it. A smell that hit you like a wall. Marijuana, thick and stale. The kind that soaks into drywall and carpet over months. But underneath it there was something chemical. Sharp. Almost antiseptic, but wrong. The way a hospital would smell if something were rotting inside it. Ray identified it before I did. He mouthed the word meth at me and tapped his holster. We announced ourselves at the door. Standard call, Dallas Police, we're coming in. Nothing. Then, a thud. Somewhere above us, upstairs. Ray told me to move quiet. He was already on the stairs, one hand on the railing, one hand on his weapon. I followed. The staircase creaked on every step, which defeated the purpose of moving quietly, but neither of us said anything. There were 4 doors at the top of the landing. 3 of them were open. The 4th, the one at the end of the hall from which the sound had come, was shut. Ray put himself to the left of the doorframe. I put myself to the right. I banged on it 3 times with my fist. No response. I tried the handle, unlocked. I pushed it open hard. and the smell came at us before the light did. Even in the darkness, before Ray found the light switch, we knew. You spend enough time in this job and your senses start to operate faster than your rational mind. Something in my reptile brain screamed at me to back up, to get out, to run. But I stood there. Ray got the light on. There was a woman on the bed. She had been there for a while. I won't go further than that. Not because I'm protecting you, but because some images don't deserve to be described. Ray turned away. I saw his shoulders heave once, and then he straightened up and became a cop again. I told him to clear that room. I cleared the rest of the floor. The other rooms were mostly bare. Clothes on the floors, fast food bags, a mattress on the ground with no frame. The last room I pushed open was so small it barely fit a cot in a bucket. No windows, no ventilation. The smell in there was different, human, stale, and unbearable. But empty. I rejoined Ray. He was pale in a way I'd never seen on him before. We headed back toward the stairs, and then the man was just there, shirtless, glazed eyes, lying flat across the top of a dresser like he'd fallen there from somewhere higher and hadn't moved. He stared at us without blinking. We had our weapons drawn and pointed at him before either of us spoke. Get down. Get down now. Hands where I can see them. He slid off the dresser slowly, hands raised, expression blank as a painted wall. Ray moved in to cuff him. I stepped back to cover the room. Something grabbed my ankle. A hand from under the bed. It clamped around my ankle with more strength than I expected and yanked. I caught myself on the doorframe, stomped down on the forearm with my free foot, and dragged out a woman from beneath the box spring. She was small and trembling, eyes blown wide, obviously deep in something pharmaceutical. I cuffed her. Ray had the man secured. We started walking them toward the stairs. We were almost to the door when the screaming started above us, not from outside, from the attic access panel at the end of the hallway, which was now hanging open, which had definitely been closed when we walked past it the first time. A man came through the opening and hit the landing running. He was shirtless, barefoot, and he was holding a kitchen knife in one hand the way someone holds it when they mean it. He was screaming in a language I couldn't parse. Not words, just sound, just raw animal fury. He charged down the hallway toward us. Ray reacted. The shot was fast. The situation was over in less than 2 seconds. I won't tell you that it was a clean feeling. Nobody who's been through something like that will tell you it's clean. But I'll tell you what Ray told me afterward, sitting in the parking lot of a Whataburger at 3 a.m., while the sun still had hours left before it would bother rising. I don't feel bad. The world's got enough of those in it already. What the investigation turned up was this. The house on Millbrook Drive was a functioning drug production and distribution site. The man we arrested on the dresser was the primary operator. The woman on the bed, the one we found when we first entered the room, had been killed by him. The reason, according to what he told investigators later, she owed him money and she'd run out of chances to pay it back. He was convicted and sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. The woman we pulled from under the bed was sentenced to 18 years on a range of charges. Ray retired 2 years after that night. He said he never lost a minute of sleep over the shot he fired. He said he slept better knowing there was one less of that kind walking around. I believed him. I still do. The second floor. Told by a former patrol officer with the Cincinnati Police Department, Ohio. In 11 years on the job in Cincinnati, I worked nights. Always nights. Days felt wrong to me, too exposed, too loud. Nights had a logic to them. You knew what kind of call you were getting before dispatch finished the sentence. Alarm triggers, fender benders, public intoxication, Bar fights that spilled into the street at 2 a.m. Nights made sense. Until the night they didn't. My shift partner was a guy we all called Booker, Devin Booker, no relation to the basketball player, which he reminded you of about twice a month. 11-year veteran, my same tenure, same shift. We'd worked together long enough that we had a shorthand. A look meant as much as a sentence. A shrug could be an entire conversation. The call came in around 1:15 a.m., a motion sensor alarm at a medical building on the east side of Cincinnati. The building was a converted office complex, 3 stories, one of those 1970s brick structures that had been retrofitted about 6 times over the decades and never quite reconciled with any of its previous lives. The bottom floor was a general practitioner's office. The second floor was a mix of specialty practices, orthopedics, dermatology, an ear, nose, and throat guy. The third floor was storage and administrative space, mostly unused. Attached to the east side of the building was a small pharmacy that had its own entrance. The motion alarm had tripped on the second floor, in the northwest office. The key holder, a woman from the property management company, met us in the parking lot. She was maybe 30, looked like she'd been woken up. Apologized twice for her appearance, even though nobody had said anything. She had a ring of keys the size of a grapefruit on a clip at her hip, and she was already sorting through them as she walked. She got us through the main entrance, no problem. Got us through the lobby and to the elevator, pressed the button for the second floor. The elevator opened to a hallway. The lights in the hallway were motion activated, the kind that click on when you walk underneath them and click off again after 30 seconds. Except 2 of them weren't working, which left the hallway in something close to darkness except for one overhead light burning at the far end, maybe 70 feet away. Right above the door to the northwest office, we started checking doors. Standard sweep. Door by door, handle by handle. All locked. All secure. We made our way down to the northwest office, the one that had triggered the alarm, and found it unlocked. We made entry. The office was clearly disused. The waiting area still had chairs lined up along the walls, the kind with chrome legs and fabric seats that had been out of style since 1994. The reception desk had a computer monitor on it, no tower, just the monitor, dusty and unplugged. We went through the exam rooms one by one. 10 rooms, maybe 12. All empty. All clear. Nothing out of place except the general sadness of a space that used to be something and wasn't anymore. We came back out into the hallway. I noticed the light situation first. The overhead bulb that had been burning at our end of the hall when we entered was off. And the single working light that we'd seen burning way down at the far end, the one above the elevator, was now on. My rational mind filed it under faulty wiring, and I was ready to move on. But Booker had stopped walking. He was standing perfectly still in the middle of the hallway, and the expression on his face wasn't an expression I'd seen on him before. Booker. What? He didn't answer for a second. Then, quietly, when we came out of the office, all those doors we just checked, they were all locked. Yeah, they're all open now. I looked down the hallway. Every single door we had locked and cleared, 10, maybe 12 of them, the entire length of the corridor, was standing open, not cracked, not drifted open the way a poorly fitted door might. Standing open, like someone had walked behind us room by room and pulled each one wide. There is a moment in certain situations where your body does something your mind hasn't authorized yet. My hand went to my radio. Booker's went to his weapon. We started clearing offices again, going back, room by room, methodically, the way you do when you're not sure what you're clearing for. We finished the last room and were turning the corner toward the waiting area of the northwest office. The main door to the office, which we had propped open with a chair when we entered, slammed shut. Not swung. Slammed. Like a hand had hit it flat. The bang of it echoed down the hall. Both our radios erupted simultaneously in a feedback burst, a screech of static that cut out as fast as it started. The silence that followed was the loudest silence I've ever stood inside. Booker looked at me. "We're leaving." We didn't run, but we didn't linger either. We took the elevator down, walked through the lobby, and stepped outside into the parking lot. I was already reaching for my radio to update dispatch when I realized something. The keyholder's car was gone. The lot was empty except for our cruiser. I radioed dispatch. I told them we'd completed the sweep with the keyholder. Building was clear. No signs of forced entry. The dispatcher came back on after a pause and said, "We're still waiting on the keyholder. She hasn't arrived yet. ETA is approximately 6 minutes. I asked dispatch to repeat that. She did. The keyholder had called from her car about 20 minutes ago, still on the highway, still 15 minutes out at the time. Dispatch had been in contact with her the whole time. She was pulling into the parking lot right now. A different car turned in from the street. A woman got out. Same woman from the property management company, same ring of keys, same apologetic expression, still looking like she'd been woken up. She had never been inside that building with us. I asked her to describe the doctor who used to lease the Northwest office on the second floor. She gave me a description. Male, mid-50s, tall, thin build, gray at the temples, wire-rimmed glasses. Quiet guy, kept to himself. Always wore a white button-down under his lab coat even when he wasn't seeing patients. I described the man who had walked us into the building. She looked at me with an expression I'd never seen on a person's face before, and hope I never see again. "That's him," she said. "That sounds exactly like him." Then she told us he had taken his own life at his vacation home on Lake Erie. He'd been gone for nearly 2 weeks. Booker requested a transfer to days the following Monday. He never explained why to anyone on the squad. He didn't need to. I stayed on nights, but I never took an elevator in that building again. The woman in the building told by a former officer with the Memphis Police Department, Tennessee. Memphis is a city with layers. You learn that fast on patrol. There's the city people see, the river, the music, the barbecue smoke curling off 100 different joints on summer afternoons. And then there's the city underneath that one, the one that operates in the hours between midnight and 4 in the morning. The one that has its own rules and its own residents and its own kind of silence. I worked that underneath city for 9 years. The call came in on a Thursday night in November. A resident on South Main had called in a noise complaint, sounds coming from inside an abandoned commercial building across the street from her apartment. She described it as rhythmic banging, like something hitting a wall over and over. Possible trespasser. Possible squatter situation. Standard enough that I took the call solo. The building in question was a former 2-story department store that had closed sometime in the late 90s and never been repurposed. The facade had been painted over so many times that the original brick was buried under at least 4 layers of paint, the newest of which was peeling in long strips like sunburned skin. The windows on the ground floor were boarded. The windows on the second floor were dark. The whole structure sat on the corner of the block like a tooth the city had forgotten to pull. I parked across the street, ran the address, confirmed the building was tagged as vacant and had been since 2001. I called in my position, told dispatch I was doing a walkthrough, and grabbed my flashlight. Getting in was easy. The plywood over the side entrance had been pried back just enough for a person to slip through, which told me the noise complaints were probably going to result in a trespass citation, and nothing more exciting than that. I went in. The interior smelled like dust and something sweeter underneath it, like fruit left too long in a warm room. The ground floor was completely gutted. No shelving, no fixtures, nothing except the bones of the place. The checkout counter was still there, long and low, bolted to the floor. The shelving tracks on the walls and ceiling remained, empty chrome runners going nowhere. My flashlight cut through the dark and found nothing. I checked every aisle. I moved slow, methodically, the way you do when you're solo and you don't know what's in front of you. Nothing. I checked the back area, the storage room, the bathroom. Nothing. I went upstairs. The second floor was the same story. Emptier, if anything. The shelving up here had been partially removed, leaving gaps in the ceiling runners that made the whole floor look like a half-finished thought. I went through it the same way, aisle by aisle, corner by corner, bathroom, storage closet. Nothing. I came back downstairs, satisfied. Noise complaints from abandoned buildings at 1 a.m. had about a dozen explanations, most of them involving wind, settling foundations, and pipes. I pushed back out through the plywood, walked to my cruiser, and was reaching for my door handle when I looked up at the building out of habit. Second floor window, left side. There was a woman standing in it. She was looking directly down at me. Long hair, silver gray, hanging past her shoulders. She wasn't moving. She was just standing there, both hands at her sides, face tilted down toward mine. And she was smiling. Not a hello, how are you smile. Not a nervous smile. Not even the smile of someone who'd been caught doing something they shouldn't. It was a smile that had no reason behind it at all. That was the part that got me, the completeness of it. I ran back to the entrance, pulled the plywood back, went up the stairs. 15, maybe 20 seconds total. I burst onto the second floor and swung my flashlight around. Empty. Window, left side. Nobody there. Not even a shadow. I swept the floor again. Every aisle. Every corner. I went into the bathroom. I opened the storage closet. I looked behind the checkout counter. Nothing. I stood in the middle of the second floor with my flashlight pointing at the ceiling and listened. My own breathing. The hum of traffic from outside. Nothing else. I went back to my car. Told myself what I needed to tell myself. That I'd been on shift for 7 hours. That the light plays tricks. That the mind fills in shapes when it wants to see something. I reached for my door again. Same window. Same woman. Same smile. This time I noticed something I hadn't before. She wasn't standing the way a person stands. She was too high in the frame. Her head was near the top of the window opening, which meant her feet, if she was standing, would have been above the floor level. I went back in. I took the stairs at a run. I hit the second floor and went directly to that window. Directly. No sweep. No methodical checking. I planted myself in front of that window and turned around. I almost missed her. It was the peripheral motion that caught it. A shift in the shadows near the ceiling in the back corner of the floor. I brought my light up. She was on the ceiling. Both hands gripped a pair of overhead shelving hooks that were still embedded in the ceiling runners. Her feet were pressed flat against the tiles above her, knees bent, body suspended horizontally, holding herself up there, the way a rock climber holds a ledge. She was looking at me from up there with that same wide, complete smile. Her hair hung straight down toward the floor. She hadn't made a sound this entire time. I ordered her down. She descended slowly, hand over hand, on the shelving hardware, dropped the last few feet, and landed in a crouch. She straightened up, looked at me, and kept smiling. She made the whole ride to the station in the back seat of my cruiser without speaking a single word. She watched me in the rearview mirror the entire time. Not nervously, not angrily, just watched, with that smile like this was all part of some extended joke that only she knew the punchline to. The psychologists who evaluated her later found a significant dissociative disorder compounded by a number of other conditions. What they couldn't explain, what nobody could adequately explain, was how she had known exactly when I was looking up at the building from outside, how she had timed it precisely each time, how she had known exactly which window I would look at. Some of my colleagues wrote it off as coincidence, as pattern recognition from a disturbed mind, finding its way into a disturbed behavior. I don't write it off as anything. I just remember that smile. The circle in the woods, told by a former officer with the Blount County Sheriff's Department, Tennessee. I want to be clear about something before I tell you this story. I'm not someone who scares easily. 21 years in law enforcement, 15 of them in Blount County, Tennessee, which sits right at the edge of the Great Smoky Mountains. Out there, you learn to read the dark the way other people read a map. You learn the difference between the noises a forest makes when nothing is wrong and the noises it makes when something is. You get comfortable with isolation, with back roads, with the specific kind of stillness that settles over the mountains after midnight. I was never the guy who jumped at shadows. I jumped at what happened on Route 11. It was a slow night in late October, not Halloween, a few nights before. That particular stretch of Route 11 runs through a section of the county where the forest comes right up to the edge of the road on both sides. No streetlights, no guardrails, just pavement and trees and whatever lives between them. I was running a routine patrol loop when I picked up a movement in my headlights. Someone was crossing the road about 40 yards ahead of me. They were moving fast, not quite running, but close to it, and before I could fully register what I'd seen, they were gone, into the tree line on the left side of the road. My first thought was a hiker. My second thought was that it was 1:30 in the morning, and hikers don't typically cross rural roads at 1:30 in the morning. I pulled up to the spot where I'd seen them, hit my spotlight, and sent the beam into the trees. Nothing. But this was my job. Someone moving erratically near a rural road at this hour had about 10 possible explanations, and at least 3 of them required me to get out of the vehicle. I radioed my position to dispatch, told them I was checking on a possible pedestrian situation, unclipped my holster, and stepped out. The forest at that hour and at that time of year has a specific atmosphere. The leaves were mostly down, which meant visibility was better than summer, but also meant the canopy wasn't blocking the wind, which was cutting through at a steady 15 miles per hour out of the northwest. The trees made noise in it, a dry, rattling noise like thousands of small paper bags. My flashlight beam reached maybe 30 feet into the dark before the trees swallowed it. I called out, announced myself, told whoever was in there to come forward and identify themselves. Then came the sound that every veteran officer knows, a branch snapping underfoot, clean and deliberate from behind a tree to my left, 30 feet, maybe less. Sheriff's Department. Come forward with your hands visible. The figure stepped out from behind the tree. It was a person wearing a mask, not a Halloween store prop, a plain, flat mask, featureless, the kind that covers the entire face without expression. They were dressed in dark clothing, head to toe. They stopped about 15 feet from me and raised their hands. I ordered the mask off. They didn't remove it. I repeated the order louder and took a step toward them. They tilted their heads slightly, like they were listening to something I couldn't hear. Then they looked to their right, into the trees. That's when I heard the footsteps to my left. I turned and drew my weapon in the same motion. The footsteps weren't subtle. Whoever was coming through those trees wasn't trying to be quiet. A second figure emerged from the darkness at the tree line about 20 feet to my left. Same dark clothing. Same type of mask. This one was holding an axe. I had my weapon leveled. I was giving orders. Hands up, drop the axe, get on the ground, and I was being ignored. Not defiantly, not aggressively. Just quietly, calmly ignored, like I was a radio station they'd chosen not to tune into. Then the sounds started coming from all directions. Footsteps to my right, to my left, behind me, from deeper in the trees ahead. Not running, walking. Slow and steady, like a procession, like something that had been planned. I turned in a full circle, my weapon tracking the movement, and I counted. 13 people, maybe 14, standing in a rough ring around me in the trees, some close enough that my flashlight reached their masks, some further back, visible only as dark shapes in the dark. At least 6 of them were carrying something. Axes, long-handled tools, something that caught the light the way metal does. They stood completely still. They didn't speak. They just looked at me from behind their masks, from inside their circle, and waited. I have been in situations in my career where I thought I might not make it home. Domestic calls that escalated past the point of no return. Traffic stops that went sideways. A standoff in 2009 that lasted 4 hours and ended with the negotiator doing all the work while I held a position in a ditch for 2 of those hours, wondering what the odds were. I know what it feels like to be afraid in a professional capacity. This was different. This was older than professional fear. This was something that reached back past 21 years of training and experience, and grabbed the part of me that was 8 years old and afraid of the dark, and reminded me that some fears are installed so deep they never leave. I stood my ground. My weapon was up. I was completely encircled. Then, from somewhere in the ring, a voice, low, measured, coming through whatever was over their face so that it was muffled and airless. 2 words. Go away. Not a threat. Not bravado. Not anger. It was a statement. Matter of fact, like a reminder. Go away. The way you'd tell someone they'd wandered into the wrong building. Something about the tone of it told me with complete clarity that this was a genuine invitation. That the alternative to going away was not something that was going to be offered to me twice. I backed toward the road, slow, weapon still up, sweeping the circle. Nobody advanced. Nobody spoke again. They just stood and watched me withdraw, all those eyeless masks tracking me, all that stillness holding inside the trees until I reached the shoulder of the road, and then I turned and I walked, not ran, but walked with every muscle in my body telling me to run. Back to my cruiser. I put the vehicle in drive and I moved down the road for half a mile before I stopped and realized my hands were trembling on the wheel. I called for backup. I called for it with the particular controlled calm that the job trains you to use when you need people to take you seriously without thinking you've lost it. They arrived 20 minutes later. 3 units, a sergeant, 2 deputies with flashlights, and a dog. They cleared the area thoroughly, went in on foot, covered the grid, had the dog work the perimeter. Found nothing. Footprints, some. Trampled underbrush in a pattern that suggested a large group of people had been standing in roughly the configuration I'd described. And nothing else. No masks, no tools, no people. Just the trees and the wind and the dry rattling of the leaves in it. My sergeant looked at me across the roof of his cruiser and asked me, carefully, if I was doing all right. I told him I was fine. I told him what I'd seen. He wrote it up as a possible trespassing incident. Investigation inconclusive. Filed it, forgot it. Moved on. I never forgot it. here is what I believe happened that night on Route 11. And I want to be clear. This is a theory, nothing more. I am not a conspiracy person. I don't have a podcast or a YouTube channel or a book to sell. I am a retired law enforcement officer telling you what I believe based on 21 years of reading situations for a living. I believe what I encountered was an organized group, not spontaneous, organized. The masks, the tools, the positioning, the silence, that takes planning. That takes coordination. The circle they formed was deliberate. The way they held their positions, the way the single voice spoke on behalf of all of them, these are not the behaviors of random people who happen to be in the same woods at the same time. I believe they were there for someone. Not for me specifically, for whoever happened to come down that road. And I believe that the first figure I saw crossing the road, the one who disappeared into the trees so quickly, was supposed to be the lure. Draw someone in. Get them off the road. Get them inside the tree line. And then the circle closes. What happens inside the circle I can't tell you. I never found out. But the fact that they chose to release me instead, that they gave me those 2 words and watched me go, tells me that the only thing standing between me and whatever this group does for its purposes was the cruiser parked on the shoulder and the badge on my chest. If I had been driving a personal vehicle that night, I would have pulled over out of ordinary human concern for a person crossing a rural road in the dark. I would have gotten out of my car. I would have walked into those trees. I would not have walked back out. I retired 3 years after that night. I moved out of the county. I don't drive rural roads after dark anymore if I can help it. And every October, when the leaves come down and the nights get long in Tennessee, I think about those 2 words coming out of that muffled, dark voice. Go away. And I'm grateful I did. Take a breath. You made it through 4 stories that over 21 years of combined law enforcement experience couldn't fully explain. Think about that for a second. These aren't people who frighten easily. These are people who chose professionally to walk toward the things the rest of us run from. And these 4 nights broke through their armor anyway. If you found yourself reading faster as you went, holding your breath at the wrong moments, thinking twice about what's outside your window right now, that's because these stories deserve exactly that reaction. Some things aren't meant to be explained. They're meant to be survived. Share this with someone who thinks they're too tough to be scared. See what they say by the end of story number 1.